And we've really seen this trip in particular be sort of a gateway for students. So Joyce and Dan are particularly encouraging of younger students to come with them on the trip, and then it opens this world of travel.
So students were very excited about the fact that they were going to 3, and I guess I should say 4 different countries. And we took an airline called Royal Air Maroc, which is a Moroccan airline. And of course, our first stop was in Casablanca. And Casablanca is in sort of North Africa, northwest Africa. And the culture is uniquely Berber, I would say, and sort of absolutely pretty much in terms of a unifying religious ideology, they're Muslims.
We're in Morocco, baby.
And I'm happy that they were able to see this country, which is a North African country, to see the people that are different, the culture that's different, the city structure, and so on, and to have a little bit of excitement riding around in local taxis. Art or craftsmanship in terms of building that one sees, without any pictures, because the sacred's not supposed to be represented in images, but still you get the sense of the divine just by looking at it and being in the presence of it.
That's why I said let's wait till we get over there.
Okay, so
Musulmans, entrez. Oui.
We cannot go in because it's prayer time. I mean, we can't go inside the mosque, but we can go in to see what's, a certain part of it. Okay? It's only certain times that it's open for us to go all the way in, and now is the time.
Truly a breathtaking sight. The workmanship is unmatched in the designs and architecture of these buildings.
Back, I don't know when they did the reforms under Hassan II, they reformed the Constitution, and yet they retained the role of the monarchy as the what they call the commander of the faithful. And that purposefully was done to ensure that there could be no other higher religious authority in the state.
Right.
And he would always be the arbiter of, the nature of Islam within Morocco.
then, of course, they went on to Ghana. Completely different environment, West Africa, and the landscape, the opportunity in Morocco. It's sort of more deserty. It's a lot on the edge of the desert, Sahel. Ghana is not so much in the Sahel. The northern part of it is, but where we were typically with more savanna and more tropical area, they were able to see that. They were able to see the difference in the cultures of the two countries, the cultural creation.
Kakum National Park, which was established in 1992, is one of the few natural habitats that's left in Ghana.
Where's Al? No, no. Okay.
This is an area of rainforest that's home to endangered mammals such as the forest elephants, bongo, antelopes, and other primates like the Diana monkey. However, because of the way that human beings have hunted and mistreated the forest and the animals in it, it's very tough right now to see these animals. You can see the elephants if you stay overnight into the late mornings, which there is a tour for. Close to Kakum National Park is Hans Bottel. This is another natural habitat that still exists today. It's a beautiful place where we can take our students to go and meet Auntie Mary, who is the curator of the crocodiles.
I like to face my fears.
Of course.
These crocodiles have been born here, they grew up here. It is another place where we can engage with the nature and respect the power of the nature that's there.
The rest you come take care of her. So I'm taking the picture with
Rose. Smile.
belt. The tail, they use it to make the belt, you know? Yeah. So it's very hard. But the side of the crocodiles, they use it to make the bag.
Yeah, you know, I work a lot here. My name is Francis Kojo. Yeah, you see, I do business here, have nice stuff, yeah, like paintings, artwork, football, just a t-shirt, a TikTok, any show you want to buy, I have them in my shop, yeah.
And what do you make, Kojo?
My handmade, you see, I can do earrings, different items, yeah, like paintings, I can do paintings too. I do a lot of things, so if you want anything, you can just contact me, I can do that for you.
How were you taught that?
Oh, it's my senior uncle who taught me how to do that. Yeah, it's a family work. Yeah, it's handmade. Yeah, it's a family work. It's not machine made. Anything you want to do here, unless you use your hand.
I think what was different from what they expected is that the variety of different experiences that they had. I believe that was something that they were not expecting from the very beginning, in terms of just looking at, let's say, Accra, the capital city of Ghana, going down. Many people had not even heard about Kwame Nkrumah, and one of the first things we did was to go to the museum park, Heritage Park, that featured the life and history of the great Kwame Nkrumah. And they weren't expecting that. They weren't expecting to find out that this man had met so many great leaders around the world, a broad range of individuals, and they were really more, I guess, put out by the fact that they didn't know this. And I would say that's one of the recurring refrains that I heard. Why didn't I know this? How is it that I got out of Wheelock, or I'm almost out of Wheelock, and I don't know any of this?
You've been kept down for
So you see on the side here the horn blowers that they have represented by water coming out. They are announcing the king arrival. That's the way it's done traditionally.
All of the statues are different. There's not, all the faces are different. It's not like they just took one and replicated it. Every single one has a different face.
You're not just here, you know, to have a trip. You are here bringing your ancestors back with you. I want you to understand that. Because you are the first of your kind to come back here in 400 years. Okay, so this is not a small thing we're talking about here.
Okay. Also, one other just point of interest, if you notice the structure, the marble or granite looking structure behind, those are machetes. You notice they come down and that's a curvature. It's in the design of a machete, which is something that, you know, people they typically carry here, but there's also royal implications for that particular design that's behind him.
Thousands upon thousands of people from Jamaica, from the Caribbean and the United States who live here already. And some of them came back when he called. Okay? Yeah. So just remember that.
And on top of Du Bois, there was quite a few other Africans in the diaspora that he gave citizenship to, and it hadn't been done up until a few months ago. The former president gave citizenship to another 34 African Americans and Caribbean. So like I said, he started it all. Without him, the whole continent that you're looking at would not be what it is.
Mid-20th century is Africa's. This decade is the decade of African independence. Forward then to independence. To independence now. Tomorrow, the United States of Africa.
That's why they wanted to get rid of him, and they did overthrow him. Because he was uniting all of Africa. You know, Guinea, Conakry, everybody who had a revolution going on, he was behind it. The Gold Coast was, formerly the Gold Coast. He was behind that because he wanted to see a United States of Africa. All the other republics that are there now essentially got their independence in 1960. Just about one after the other, they started coming. And shortly after that, or maybe simultaneously with the fight here in Ghana, was the Mau Mau fight in Kenya, where they actually went to war, against the British to get their independence with Jomo Kenyatta.
A lot of the leaders came through Ghana. A lot of the leaders were training for their guerrilla wars right here in Ghana. Guinea-Bissau and Amilcar Cabral, case in point. Cabral was here. They knew each other. Nkrumah knew Lumumba. He knew Kenyatta. These guys weren't just isolated. They were talking to each other, and they were cooperating with each other. Even the South African movement, as far in terms of giving shelter and giving refuge, it was done here in Ghana.
We welcome again to the United States, which he knows so well, the first citizen of Ghana, President Nkrumah.
There is a new African in the world. That new African is ready to fight his own battle and show that after all, the black man is capable of managing his own affairs.
My favorite part of our whole journey to Ghana is I get to work with my father, the great Professor Martin Owusu. If it weren't for him, then nothing I'd be doing today would exist. In 2010, it was our honor to have Professor Martin Owusu at Wheelock College as the visiting scholar, where he performed a segment from the story Anansi Told, a book that he had written when I was just a child, and took the young people, the children, through a traditional African storytelling session. It was a pleasure to take some students a few years ago to go and meet Professor Owusu after he had just received the African Genius Award, which was designed after Kwame Nkrumah. group had the honor of witnessing the play A Sudden Return, performed at Methodist University, where Professor Owusu is the director of the theater department, a program which he started about 5 years ago.
He's asleep. Yangwa! 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 What is it? What is it? Tell me. Go and see what your brother is doing in the streets. Huh? What is it? What is he doing? In front of Mosisto. Everybody is surprised. We thought he was fighting somebody, but he wasn't. He suddenly started shouting. I didn't believe it. They were beautiful. Hey!
You did well today. What's your favorite part about the trip? What was your favorite part about the trip? Right here. The car.
When we get to the ground, my main job is to tell our story, not just as a group of diasporans and Africans going back home to learn and to teach, but also to prepare our students to be able to go and teach media literacy, media production, and prepare equipment that we bring for the students and the young people that we work with there. Our goal is for them to be able to tell their own stories outside of the Hollywood track. So we prepare to train them in how to read and write media and how to produce media. So when we're on the ground, we're not just teaching the students, but we're also creating a documentary of our own experience so that when we come back, there's a record, there's a media record of the work that we do there. There's a record of what we've learned, what we've taught, so that then we can use that to build on. Then we can use that to share with other people who want to go correctly onto the African continent to build.
At the schools and orphanage that we went to, there were two of them, one at Bosco, one in Benin. One in Ghana, one in Benin. And in those schools, I basically went there to teach media production because there's a great value in that. I taught with Rose Locke and Dan Owusu. We were basically teaching the value of how representation leads to power, basically. And we gave them a strong message that you shouldn't let that someone else's representation represent you. What's important is that you know who you are and that your community knows who you are. But there will be people to try to represent you in another way in order to mess with any power balance.
They are curious to know. There's a certain level of excitement about going to a new place and encountering new people, and their perceptions are also colored by whatever they've seen in movies or mainstream media.
Examples of what I've seen in the media here that describe Africa and really gave me a glimpse of what I expected. Things like the Looney Tune cartoons, and even the Mickey Mouse cartoons, stuff like that. Back in the days, they really portrayed Africans in a way that they're savage, tribal. If you go to Africa, they're probably gonna eat you or something. They have spears and pitchforks and stuff like that, and they're gonna attack you. Depends on who's behind the camera and behind the computer, and that's really a message that we wanted to show them and make sure that they understood over there. And I'm pretty sure, I'm 100% positive that they understood that message.
They are all designed to take the work out of housework. Yeah. Oh, yes, indeed, ma'am. It's guaranteed, to answer every household need. And it's wonderful. I just can't find the words.
But the part that I want you to understand and focus on is that you, the manipulators of the camera, those who are organizing the story behind the images, those people, when I grew up as a little girl, there was segregation, apartheid in the United States. Okay, so that meant that we as black people were not supposed to go to certain parts of town. We were not supposed to go, we didn't go to the same schools as our white friends and so on and so forth. That was the system. You know about that, right? Okay. So, however, my parents, my teachers, the deacons, deaconesses in the church and so on, they said to me, you can do anything you want to do. Like we're telling you right now. You can do anything you want to do. You can be anything you want to be because no one is better than you. That's what I heard all the time. Not only that, no one is better than you, but we are depending on you to do something, to do service, and to represent the community and bring something back for your family and your community. That was in my head all the time, pounded in my head. My father, my mother, grandparents, everybody.
I think is what Dr. Joyce talked about. The gaze. Whose perspective are you telling the story through? Because if you're a very good editor, if you're a very good camera person, and you're not telling your story, you're doing a very good job at telling someone else's story. You're sabotaging yourself. All right? So don't just be the tool. Be the director of the story. Be the producer of the story. What did you learn from us you think you can take into your future?
I learned how to take pictures and also how to make everything. And I think with the help of this, I can now create my own videos and do I'm happy to be part of it.
Absolutely. Speak loud because you see the young ones in the back, they need to hear you.
I really learned how to use the camera, even in some parts of the camera, and how to make videos, and also how to interview people.
Smile, so beautiful, yes, show them.
Because as soon as I taught those kids and I talked to them and I showed them the software, and even when we left, they showed me that, okay, we know exactly what to do with this, and they produced.
We take the time to understand how we engage with them so that our students, their institutions or organizations benefit from that. So as I said, these are deep contacts, and one of the things we tell people is this is not going to be your average American Express experience. Because of our deep ties into the culture, you're going to see things, you're going to see traditional societies. You're going to understand more about traditional spirituality than you normally would just by going to a hotel and sitting on a tour bus. Students get involved with teaching. They have hands-on experiences, and they actually see a child and understand that here's a child that's hungry for knowledge that they can impart. So I think it's a very it's a very powerful, as I said before, a very powerful and transformative experience.
So we've been working on telling their own stories and talking about how stories are valuable and are important to people. And oftentimes, I began the workshop by talking about what they've heard about America and their history with Ghana, and how what they've heard are stories. And then I started talking to them about their stories and how people in America, kids in America, think they know things about kids in Africa, and they don't. And kids in Africa may think they know teaching about America. It might be different. So we began for them to write their own stories, for them to talk about their own stories, and have them tell their stories, be the creators of their stories.
There's cultural differences that I was made aware of, educational differences that I've been made aware of. One of the things that really stands out is the willingness to learn and the inquisitiveness of students to learn. And if that can be fed, if that can be, somehow promoted and facilitated, I think that they will have bright and wonderful futures.
Experiences that perhaps made the greatest impact on the students, I would say certainly that scaling those cliffs to get up to the suspension bridges in the Kakum rainforest in Ghana, that probably was the most exciting, but probably the most powerful before that would have been the Castle Dungeon, the Cape Coast Castle Slave Dungeon, a Holocaust site that has been preserved. It is being preserved by the Ghanaian government and UNESCO. It was quite something for them, and they were totally shaken by that experience.
In Ghana, we have 3 of such castles. We are standing within one, Cape Coast Castle. It's a staircase that leads up there. When you look at the archway, it's written 1894. And it is already 300 years old, over 300 years old. Then we have the other in Accra, the Christian Borg Castle, built by the Danish around 1665. Then we have the first to be built around this part, at Elmina by the Portuguese, 1482. A place as a headquarters, place of residence, then to conduct their business in local products. So that's why they built it. So they traded in gold, as you might have heard the name, Gold Coast. But let me also inform you that in those days when they said Gold Coast, it didn't encompass the entirety of modern day Ghana. Only towns along the coast where gold was found. So in those days we had 3 component parts of this modern day Ghana. We have Gold Coast along the coast, the Ashanti Kingdom, then we have the Northern Territories. It was after the British had taken over, went to governance, that they brought these parts together to form modern day Ghana. Those goods that were doing the exchange with were local products, gold, and other local products like salt and other things. Then somewhere along the line, when the Americas and the Caribbeans were founded, then goods involved in the trade changed to human beings. Why human beings? Because they said there was the need for human labor, in the Americas and Caribbeans. From the journey up there, if we are brought from the northern part through Brong-Ahafo region, Ashanti region, then the central region, then you had the opportunity of having a last bath in a river. Now they call it a slave river. Right, so we have a number of dignitaries visiting us. When you look here, the former US president and the family were here. 2009. The wife believes that her ancestors went through here. That's why when they visited Ghana, visiting the late President Atamus, they came down here. And those who saw the man, they said after the tour, he wept bitterly.
Oh, okay. The left side is
sleeping place, dining That's why I have this drainage system meant for the waste to flow into the ocean. There's a hole, an observation hole they call it. Sadly enough, it was a black man who was employed and kept there to keep watch over the colonies. So if anything happened, no, he went back to report. I mean, the stench and all this, you were given food here. You have to eat for survival. Because when you refused to eat and then you died, the burial ground was the ocean.
The most powerful experience on the trip was definitely the slave dungeons. Of course, we talked about it in the classrooms, we talked about going, but talking about it is completely different than actually being there and just seeing what you see. It's hard to even put into words how powerful it was and what you feel when you actually step into the area. It is a completely different feeling. It was powerful.
So they had to use these things lying there, known as cannons. And we have the cannonballs. Let me loosely use them as call them guns, and then they are bullets, where they use for the defense purposes.
Okay, this one's heavy.
Therefore, when they felt the need to satisfy themselves sexually, some of them went to town for the local ladies. Others decided to use the female slaves who were kept down here. So they came down from their residence up there, came and looked among the female slaves, picked out the attractive ones, and if you yielded to their pressure, they gave you a thorough bath, sent you up there, sexually abused you, and brought you back. Those who resisted were pushed in here. They lock you up, use the drainage system as your toilets. They gave you food through here, and spent no less than 7 days here. The purpose, the intention was for you to change your mind, so that the next time when you come, you give it easily. Remember that once you enter this arena, or this venue, there was no way, there was nowhere you were going to escape. Who were you going to call, and who was going to respond to your call? Therefore, when they found you giving them trouble by their standards, no, they came to push you inside here. There were 3 of such doors. Look at the thickness. 2, there are no ventilation holes. 3, no food. 4, no water be given you.
They didn't just come because they were strong and they could stand the diseases and the heat. They had the skills and the knowledge. Because cotton doesn't grow in Europe. Sugar cane doesn't grow in Europe. Rice doesn't grow in Europe. Oh, indigo doesn't grow in Europe. None of those products grow in Europe. They are grown and cultivated here on this continent for 5,000 years. The people who went over, yes, they were strong. Yes, they could stand the diseases perhaps, but they also had the knowledge of how to process those crops, how to grow them, how to dig those canals, so for the rice in South Carolina and Georgia and so on and so forth, how to process the sugar cane on those plantations and make rum and so on and so forth. They had the knowledge. So they were specially ordered from certain regions. You said they were branded, that's right. You know, in other parts of the West Coast, you know, like Liberia or Sierra Leone, they were brought specifically mail ordered almost because they had the skill in rice growing. Okay, so it's important to know, and because of their skills, what they built in just the United States alone equals into the quadruple millions of dollars in terms of wealth and riches that was built. So let's talk about the tragedy that was done and the ongoing suffering and the lack of resolution of humanity. It also, I tell my students, follow the money.
I went underground and showed you the 3rd compartment, that observation hole. So you look at the linkage. Church, observation hole. Church, observation hole. So while you are there singing holy, 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 then you come to look whether your goods were safe.
Ideally, they're bringing a new energy back, right? A new understanding of a part of the world, as I said, that perhaps they didn't know anything about, or perhaps is where their own cultural heritage is from, but they haven't had a chance to go or learn as much as they wanted about it. So certainly, you know, that energy, that knowledge, which hopefully then they're, you know, passing on in their personal lives, in their classrooms. I think I've also seen it open students' interest and attention to global work.
On the way to Benin, we stopped in Togo. We were shocked to find a Confederate flag flying over the hotel that we were about to stay in. In Wheelock fashion, we educated the people in the community about what that flag means, and we insisted that they take it down. And we insisted that they pass on the word so that flag does not fly or in any community in Togo, and for them to spread the word.
So we're going to travel those 8 kilometers on this lake, which is called Lake Buffalo Lake. It's an industry that people who live on the lake engage in, fishing. 1770 it was founded. The people that came here were refugees from Ajah-Tado. You've heard that name before because it's the same place that the 3 kings that founded the kingdom of Dahomey came from. One went to Abomey and stayed, one Alada, and then the other in Porto-Novo.
So the original people came from Tado Ajah, which was the home to the original 3 brothers, the leopard kings that settled Dahomey, Alada, and Porto-Novo. And yesterday we visited the palace of one of the descendants, King Putusewe-Hapon III. People fled here to escape war. And normally what happened to people, if they became prisoners of war, is they were sold into slavery.
We attended the first part of a reparations forum, which our own Dr. Joyce Hope Scott was part of establishing with local African leaders and leaders from around the world. One of the powerful forces behind the reparations forum is Benin Espoir, an organization of young people who are social activists in Benin, a program which they started as students with the help of our own Dr. Joyce Hope Scott. And this speaks to how the continent and diasporans deal with the trauma of slavery and colonialism.
Africa, wake up.
It was also a pleasure to meet Nicola, Dr. Joyce's colleague from the University of Edinburgh, Scotland, and together they have worked on this reparations farm.
Sure, the improving the lives of children and families piece, I think that's always, on faculty's minds when they design these trips. I think the service piece very directly does that, right? So there are classrooms that WheeLock students have been teaching English in for 12 years. There are orphanages where students have been going and interacting with children for 12 years. The piece that Professor Dan Owusu has brought around the digital storytelling puts that into play even more concretely. So really, producing digital stories that record, the history and the stories of folks on the ground.
Commitment, their sincere commitment to learning, the level of engagement and creativity. Those are the words that come to mind when I think about these students. They are, as the old people would say here, trying to make a way out of no way, and they were able to do that.
So the pre-production, répétez ça. Pre-production. C'est comme on est en train de construire une maison.
Pink. Rose. Pink. Rose. Red. Rouge. Red. Rouge. Orange. Orange.
S. Camera shots. S-H-O-T-S. Camera shots. Vous avez ça? Close-up?
Over shoulder.
Vous avez le close-up?
Shot. Over shoulder.
So maintenant, on écrit le numéro 4.
15. Okay. And so, when children in the United States of America, when they see this video, what do you want them to know about the young women here in Benin?
Quel message, quelle communication tu veux partager avec les filles comme toi aux États-Unis?
Je veux être le secrétaire général.
Okay, she wants to be the Secretary General.
Mm-hmm.
Très bien.
Merci.
Excellent.
Comment allez-vous?
Ça va bien.
Très bien.
Je m'appelle Soubéo Bastou.
Quel âge avez-vous?
15 ans.
Où restez-vous?
Je reste à Abogo.
Et quelle sont?
Abogo.
Action.
Oui, madame. Comment vous appelez?
Moi, je m'appelle Meïnou Agnès.
Vous avez quel âge?
J'ai 12 ans.
Vous faites quelle école?
Benin, one of the things that was very, very different about that is that they got a chance to stay home, to have a home experience, because they stayed in apartments that's owned by an NGO, an American NGO, that does development work in Benin and Ghana and other countries. And so they stayed at home. So it was home, it was clean your own plates, it was clean the kitchen, it was get the breakfast ready, and it was being in the courtyard and talking to the local people and playing with the local children. So it was a completely different experience for them. They were delighted to have that experience. All of that rolled into one is what made the countries, I think, unique and uniquely different for the students on this trip.
About to find out, my friend. Enjoy your meal.
Is that hotel food?
Would you describe it?
I'm not sure. It tastes like something I've tasted before. I was really just motivated and inspired to just be the best me that I can be and really just follow my goals and the dreams that I have and try to accomplish as much as I can, because anything is really possible. Meeting the kings and leaders and a whole bunch of powerful leaders, like, I was so motivated.
His Majesty welcomes you and thanks you for the support and the interest you have shown in coming here and being with him, toward him, the interest and the respect you've shown toward him. Thanks you.
Afin que les petits-fils comprendront la vraie histoire de l'Afrique et du Bénin particulièrement.
So, His Majesty says that gives you his blessings, and that when you go back, you will be even more successful than you've been so far.
To know is what can our students do more to directly connect with the young people here when they get back to the States, so they can continue to build together, even though they may be far apart across oceans. What can they do right away to help each other?
So just observe the work that Dr. Joyce has done up until this point.
Le programme de Joyce pour Africa et être ensemble avec Bénin Espoir. Bénin Espoir englobe tous les étudiants et tous ensemble nous allons travailler.
So if you could stay connected to Professor Joyce and follow the connection with Hope for Africa and Bénin Espoir, the student group from yesterday, if you continue down that same, along those same lines of cooperation, then that would be very important, because Bénin Espoir affects all the students everywhere.
This is a special trip. It's a very special trip because most service learning programs are not as in-depth and do not have what we offer on this trip. So our students get to go and sit with kings, not chiefs, kings, and get to have meaningful, deep discussions about the future of Africa, the history of Africa, their own history, and the role that they have to play in Africa's future.
One of our students has been admitted for a training in Accra for UN.
Which school in Accra?
To university itself. I'm building the same university at Takoradi.
Okay, thank you.
So
in Ghana?
In Ghana. So I'm between Ghana and 91% Nigerian.
Wow.
91% Nigerian.
Wow.
We need more Ghanaians.
There are few Ghanaians.
Il reste encore 100 ans.
So he says he's got more time to spend on the throne. Don't worry about it. See the peace, the integrity of the spiritual system. You follow that? He's responsible for that. It's integrity.
Et aussi, il arrête les films que les gens fabriquent sur le vaudou pour dire n'importe quoi. Il les arrête.
When people make films that talk about all kind of crap like we see over there, Hollywood, you know, the woo stuff, he takes those. No matter if they're attacking Christianity, no matter if they're attacking Islam or they're attacking the traditional, they have to come to him. They can be arrested and brought to him.
Well, when we were in Benin, there were many experiences that were incredibly spiritual and deep and really left lasting impressions on me. I found pieces of myself and pieces of a culture that was lost to me. And so I believe that that was probably my most intense and memorable experience.
directly improves the lives of children and families. I think the social justice piece as well. I think being, again, really deeply engaged in a community.
The Pantheon is a museum that Papa da Silva created to honor our Pan-African history.
Showing the bad image of Africa by showing this film everywhere. So I don't accept that. We don't accept that. It's something negative against we blacks. It's not good. They're supposed to show something positive we are doing, not to show witchcraft. Witchcraft is another war. We know that it's negative. We don't like that. So people are showing killing or doing that, killing your brother to take his wife, or all that comes from here. That is not good.
So he's a propaganda machine.
Yeah.
One of the more enjoyable experiences was meeting Papa da Silva. His ancestors had escaped from slavery in Brazil and returned to Benin. And now he's a great activist and somebody that helps us to remember our past and to use that to move forward into our future.
He likes people to come and to debate efforts that you have made, that we are making. We have demonstrated that we are human beings like everyone else. That's victory.
Dieu vous aidera pour que vos enfants deviennent davantage.
So God will help you for your kids
des héros.
To become, heroes and to do better than what you've done.
C'est pourquoi j'ai créé.
More absorbed in this.
He's
so cute. Come on.
Brother, shout.
That's fine.
You don't buy now. You'll be happy if you shout. Brother, shout.
In terms of expectations, student expectations, I think that for the most part, the students that I've been able to take with me have always had a desire to learn about Africa. Of course, they come with media images, which is all that they have, all that they come with essentially until we come into the classroom, and then they start to see other kinds of images and other things begin to interest them. But still, I would say that people don't actually have any idea of what they can expect from Africa other than what they've been groomed to believe is there. But what I can say is very important and was so encouraging and rewarding about the students is that they were open to learning, and they sort of had the idea that they were going to learn something different and something new. Well, the exciting thing that's happening next now is that we are in 2018 have a service learning program to Brazil. And why Brazil? It's the most fantastic thing for me. It's something I've always wanted to do. Brazil is the key to that triangle that I was talking about, reverse triangle, because very few people realize that the largest number of Africans that were taken out of the continent, a large number of them went into Brazil because the Portuguese were the first ones to really sort of take off with the movement of people from the continent to other spots of the globe. Right now, today, many probably know that Brazil has the largest black population outside of Africa. The only other nation that has a larger population is Nigeria, which is on the continent itself. Brazil is like a reflection of the African continent. The culture, the food, the spirituality, the appearance of the people, the diversity, the music, it's there. It's there. I like to tell my students that, look, if a Martian came here looking for black people, they wouldn't come to the U.S., they'd go to Brazil, because that's where most of them would be. It's so important that we link to Brazil, that triangle be reconnected, okay? That we talk about the Caribbean, we link the Caribbean, the United States easy enough because we can see the link, and the language is also easy. But we have to transgress the boundary or the chasm that language presents for us, and we are planning to do that with this trip to Brazil. We will be connecting with some local organizations that are there, some students, the universities there in Bahia, which is really the spot for culture and spirituality, etc., and history. And it's an exciting opportunity for students, and it makes perfect sense in this sort of schema, this ideological frame that I have about the reconnection of the triangle from the reverse, from the Americas, now back across the Atlantic to Europe and to Africa. I think perhaps the most significant change in the students that I observed was a commitment to understand what had happened to them, to understand themselves as leaders and as potential leaders in the future, and the value that they, as students, not simply students, but people who had something to share, who shared it, who learned something, and who could come back now and share it with their students, with their colleagues, and so on. I think it was an internal kind of transformation, an awakening, an appreciation of themselves as people for what they could bring to others and from what they could do to continue to grow themselves, and a commitment, I think, to undo some of the learning or mislearning that they've been engaged in, and a commitment to help their students and their clients or colleagues and so on, their families most importantly, to understand the changes that they had undergone and the experiences that they'd had, and possibly enlighten them more to opportunities, just what the options are out there by embracing Africa.
So it's just good to see that an entity like ECOWAS does exist to set that infrastructure for West Africa, and then eventually the whole continent, to start doing business with each other, West Africans, to start educating each other, to stop the brain drain where students, young people are going to other countries and getting educated and then staying in those countries, using what they've learned to develop and to build those other countries. Now we're coming back. And so there's so many people coming back to West Africa, so many people getting educated right in West Africa. And so we have the most natural resources on the planet. We have the largest human resources on the planet. And I think that we're heading in the right direction. And like I said before, Africa is the future.
I see big things for West Africa. We met so many leaders and people that were just had so much goals for making West Africa better than what it is. They talked about installing hope into the children and just making West Africa what they know it can be.
Another thing that I see for the future of West Africa is that there's just a natural calling that I see, or that I felt. I felt a natural calling. And I've heard this from many other diaspora that I went over there to visit in the continent. There were other people over there that came from the States that told me the same thing. They just felt the continent calling them.
I see the future of West Africa as being extremely bright, forward-thinking, innovative, and I believe that Africa is definitely a strong power that the rest of the world should look out for.
The West Africa region is currently a major global region. It may not be recognized as such by a lot of people who don't understand the region and its importance. However, for example, right now, 25% of America's oil is supplied by the West Africa region.
The future of West Africa and the continent in general is very bright. I see it as very bright. There's a lot of development happening by Africans. This is the difference. I feel as though in the past, people from different countries and around the world have come to Africa to try to develop it. But what I'm liking that I'm seeing now is that Africans are collaborating with with foreigners, and they are developing the continent while keeping their traditions, while keeping the spirit, the true spirit of Africa.
It has so much strength and resources, and there's so much there to be tapped into, and that is being tapped into. And as the diaspora comes back and reconnects with West Africa and with Africa as a whole, and Africa builds on itself, I believe that the future of West Africa and Africa as a whole is extremely strong.